with me here today, because today's topic is going to be about the importance of what happens after the deal closes, and more so, what is the responsibility as an agent when there is issues like personal items that are left. Oh, wait a minute, someone is using. Personal items left after close of escrow. What are the responsibilities of the agent?
Recording in progress.
Hold on. Okay. The importance and understanding. I don't know if I'm going to be able to expand this. Thanks, Isaac and Leanne, for being on here. Yeah.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
I'm sorry.
He said, thank you for having us.
Oh, we've been having a little bit of technical issues with our computer. So again, I apologize, but thank you again for jumping on the call. So really what I wanted to share with you today, and I also have Maria with us here. So say hi, Maria.
Hi, everybody.
So if anyone knows, Maria is our escrow officer here for Escrow South Bay. She's amazing with so many years of experience. She's dealt with the ins and outs of escrow, from working with our agents, but more so working with other agents as well. So really, I just wanted to give a tidbit on the importance and avenue on the day-to-day of Maria. And I'm so grateful that you took a little bit of time to come in and talk to us, because again, it's important to understand the elements when you're working with a real estate agent.
Yes.
And how that works, because you have different personalities,
Yes.
you have different demeanor, and there's always going to be challenges, right?
Yeah.
When dealing with agents, and you got to take the good from the bad as well, right? So, and that ultimately puts the pressure on all of us, because what is the common goal of what we're trying to accomplish here?
We were trying to close escrow so we can get paid, and also have your buyer in the new home and your seller selling their home, whether to upgrade or to move out of the area or whatever they're trying to accomplish, downsize, move to a retirement community. So, this is your job. So of course, you want to get paid for your work. So of course, that's our number one goal. And you as an agent representing your client want to make sure that they are happy with the transfer, whether they're the recipient of the property or they're selling their property.
That's right.
Close the one chapter and get started anew.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. But there's a lot more elements to that than just what she says. I mean, we got to deal with so many different other obstacles and challenges that come with that. And understanding our position and our role as real estate professionals. Remember, escrow is considered a third party.
We're the neutral third party.
So the neutral third party when it comes to dealing with the complexity of escrow, right? And the ins and outs of real estate. So the reason I wanted to, just collaborate with you, Maria, is because again, you get all kinds of different scenarios and situations.
Yes.
And we got Torrance Fire Department here as well. Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, appreciate you. Are we in compliance so far?
That's good.
Awesome. How you doing?
Ron Riggs.
He's still with us. Yeah,
Okay.
Ron Riggs. Yes.
Every so often, my daughter's involved in some political action group.
Beautiful.
And they meet here sometimes.
Yeah. They come in and
I
hear.
walked around the corner, I was like.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for what you do, folks. So again, so tell us what is one of the biggest issues that we would deal with after close of escrow, Maria? That you
From our agents?
from our agents
Okay.
or in general?
Okay, well, what I tend to deal with, one of the issues that I have dealt with after closing is receiving invoices for bills for payment. Escrow, when escrow closes, we're not supposed to be receiving any kind of invoices for payment or drawing any kind of instructions. Once the escrow has closed, it is over. So when I get invoices after close of escrow, it's really putting me in a bad position because these things are supposed to be disclosed on the estimated closing statement that goes to the lender. And the lender has to approve all the payments because they're gonna do a final statement. And then if I show something that was paid out of the seller side that the lender never saw because you submitting an invoice to me after the fact, that's gonna create a problem. So sometimes I will unfortunately have to say, no, I cannot pay this. Because if it's a large amount or it's to a person rather than a business, the lender's gonna have a problem with it. Because the whole reason the seller side estimate is disclosed now to the lender is so that they can make sure that no funds from the seller are going back to the buyer behind the scenes. Because when I started in escrow, it was only the buyer side escrow estimate that the lender would see. But I guess because money was changing hands, that the lender didn't know between seller and buyer behind, the scene, they said, no, we want to see all the funds that the seller's paying, and we want to see all the funds that the buyers are paying. So submitting invoices to escrow after closing is a huge no-no. So that's one of the big things that we deal with.
Yeah.
So if there was something that was disclosed, but didn't manage to transact during the actual time period. Is that,
In what manner?
So, I don't know.
It's disclosed.
like, if it showed up on the seller's report or vice versa on like the buyers, I don't know.
Like on a car disclosure? Is that what you're referring to, or a request for repair?
Yes,
Okay, so I'm not even supposed to get a request for repair
okay,
at all. What's supposed to happen is when the request for repair is put together, whatever credit that the seller's giving the buyer is supposed to be shown to me via addendum. So I'm supposed to get an addendum to the contract fully executed, showing that the seller is giving $10,000 credit for closing costs when there's a lender involved. So if we have a lender, we never call repairs. The lender does not want to know that the seller's getting great credit for repairs. So we have to call it closing costs. So that's the reason for the addendum, because we are not allowed to give the request for repair to the lender. They're not supposed to see that because they don't want to see that there's repairs that need to be done. So when I get that addendum, then I generate a corresponding amendment that mirrors that, stating that the seller is going to credit the buyer X amount of dollars toward closing costs. Now, if we have a cash transaction in that regard, we can go ahead and I can get the request for repair because there's no lender involved. So if the seller wants to credit $5,000 for repairs or whatever they want to do, we can express it that way because we are not dealing with the lender.
And just to add to what Maria is saying, the importance is because the lender will red flag it. The underwriter will see and get a little suspicious because the number one thing is this borrower going to be able to pay this mortgage payment? And if there's severity issues with the property, they're looking at it from a perspective is, what if these are major things that they don't have the money, and instead of fixing it or dealing with it, I'm just gonna leave the property. So they see that from that angle and that perspective. So it's important for us to watch the information that we give back and forth. And TC is a vital part of this because TC is supposed to see, and ultimately before it gets even sent out to escrow, because once escrow has it, then it's usually divulged to other people as well. So the line of defense is obviously the communication between you and your client and your TC that is helping you navigate this. But that's where most, if not all of the deals fall apart is, after during a request of repairs, But as Maria was saying, Maria is not the one navigating that. That's between agent to agents and negotiating those parameters in place. But as she also mentioned, yeah, in lieu of the repairs, we're gonna just give credit towards closing costs. But you gotta also watch in how you present it, because again, if the lender finds out, they may question it, and ultimately a can of worms open up, where now the lender is saying, well, now that we know is, I want to see the home inspection report. I want to deep dive into this, and they may ask the seller to fix or repair it. So again, just the elements of surprise with that. So good deal. So what other issues that you come across when it comes to a deal closing, that you come across as well, Maria?
I have a couple. I have a
Yeah.
couple more.
And the reason again is because the topic today is about how to navigate, how to work with a buyer that ultimately, it always happens. You move in and now there's a laundry list of items that the buyer feels that the seller did not disclose, right? How do you navigate that? But again, we'll talk about that after.
Well, I don't usually get those calls per se. I think they kind of go to the agent more
Right.
than escrow. What I have received phone calls about is possession. So when the buyer goes to move in and they were supposed to commit to a property that had repairs or was cleaned up and it's not, and there's still debris, there's still repairs that weren't made, or the seller is still there. So I've had that happen, like, the possession has not been given. And I've had sellers that also fight when they haven't received their proceeds and they feel that they do not have to give up possession because they haven't received their proceeds from the sale. And that is not what the contract says. So the day of recording on the contract, I believe 6 p.m. is when their buyer's supposed to get possession of the property, unless you fill in extra days, like plus 1, 2, 3, however many days, and then use the SIP form if it's going to be more days. But some sellers, they just don't care what the contract says. So they tend to, and that's rare, but it has happened, and it's happened a few times where, we close escrow, like special recording on Friday. So we can't disperse until the following business day, which would be a Monday. And they don't want to give up the keys. So then it ends up being an issue. So I've had them call me about that, although it's not my issue, but I give them a recommendation and have them talk to their agent. But I get those phone calls, so that happens.
Very good. One more, if you can share with us, and that'll put you where we need to be with the 20 minutes as I asked. Thank you,
Okay,
Maria.
yeah, no problem. So the other one is wiring instructions for the seller's proceeds. So what ends up happening is we have an escrow package that goes out at the beginning of the transaction. We request how the seller would like to receive their proceeds by check or wire. And we have that notarized so that we have, exact instructions. And so, like, for instance, I just had a closing where the proceeds were over $1 million. So there was a concern because the seller was not seeing the money in her bank account, and I wired it yesterday. So what we do is we get these wiring instructions to go into the party's bank account, and we confirm the wiring instructions with the client. But I sometimes have a client that wants to change their wiring instructions after we already have a signed and notarized instruction. And so that is also a big red flag for us because we've already had them provided and have it notarized, and now they're trying to send me an email saying to send it somewhere else. So we do not accept those extra emails. Sometimes I've had an agent say, oh, my client doesn't want to send her their money there, or they don't want to check, they want to send it here to another bank account, and then they try to send me the wiring instructions, and we cannot accept those. So we will have to have a brand new form filled out and signed and notarized that we're sending it elsewhere. And so everybody complains, oh, we have to go do it again, and we have to get a notarized. It's for their security, because what if somebody's hacking the email and they're trying to get me to wire their proceeds somewhere else, and we're talking about over $1 million, or even 100,000, 200,000, 50,000. It's their money and it matters where it's going. And so we're trying to be as secure as possible and make sure that the money gets where it's supposed to go. And so it's a very dangerous thing, especially if you try to get involved as an agent, because you're creating liability for yourself by taking that on. You just have to tell them no, talk to Escrow, and we'll generate a new form, and they need to start all over and give us new instructions. So, yes.
Awesome. Does Escrow have notaries or do you need to take?
The notary.
Okay.
Mhm. So, yes.
Most of your escrow or assistants usually are notary certified.
Mhm.
Yeah, it makes it a whole lot easier for your
Yes.
clients to come in.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
very good. Any other questions?
So just because I haven't seen that process, so the person has to come in so that you can actually.
They don't have to come in and see me, they can go to any notary. So like, let's say we're dealing with someone that lives in another state in Nevada. And we will either FedEx or email, or, however they want to receive their escrow package. And they can go to any notary, they don't have to come to me, and I'm the only person that can see it.
Okay, but it needs to be notarized in
Yes.
order for you to be able to.
Yes, and I get the original back with the notary document,
Oh,
so.
Yeah, so there's grant deeds, loan docs that, there's certain specific forms that the lender may want in their benefits well.
Mhm.
So. Maria, thank you so much. Right on time, like I said, 3:20. I appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, team, so let me pull up my form real quick. How's everyone doing, by the way? Everyone good? Good. So agency relationships and duties after a real estate transaction concludes. Legal, contractual, and practical advice for buyers, agents. So when does an agency relationship duties begin and end between a real estate broker, salesperson, right? So obviously, you know how it starts, right? When you get the listing, when you have the buyer representation agreement, now your goal in your job is now to go and identify, negotiate, open, close, escrow. Okay, no difference than when going on a listing appointment, getting the listing signed, executed. Now you get to work, get professional photography, put it on the MLS, and start doing and concluding open houses. Now, I really wanted to kind of dive deep into some of the complexities that could occur, right? And one of the forms that I'd like to share with you, if you don't already know, is the VP form. Does everyone know what the VP form is?
No.
Okay. So the VP form is verification of property condition. Okay, this is one of your last part of the defense when it comes to the real estate transaction just before it closes. Now, the contract stipulates that within 5 days of escrow closing, the buyer shall do a verification of property inspection, or better known, condition. This is what's called, in better terms, buyer final inspection. And the reason I want to share this form with you, because this will alter any issues after the deal closes. All right, if you're proactive and engaged in this, then you can definitely protect your client, the buyer, protect the seller, right? There's also a section number 3 that says, buyer waives the right to conduct a final verification of property condition. If buyer does not verify the property condition, buyer is acting against the advice of the broker or brokerage, okay? Now I want to stress and I want to emphasize the importance of that section 2, because if this property is being purchased by an investor that ultimately is going to tear down the property or renovate the property, then they typically would not have to do a final walkthrough. They already know what they're getting themselves into. They already physically saw the property. and alter of what the offer they're gonna submit, and they know what's to expect, right? Because they're gonna either gut up the entire property, plumbing, electrical, floors, drywall, roof, foundation, whatever that looks like, right? But the importance of understanding is, and I always advise and always said, regardless of the condition of the property, do a final inspection, a final walkthrough. And the reason is because they'll give you a perspective. What this form says on the RPA is that the property will be left in the condition that you originally saw it when you submitted an offer. But it also stipulates that the VP will also protect the buyer from any request of repairs, as Maria was saying earlier. If the buyer is in negotiations, right, sends out the RR form, the request for repairs, asking for certain items to be corrected, or a credit, or in lieu of a credit, a price reduction, then that defeats the purpose. But if the buyer is requesting, hey, I want you to fix that leaky faucet in the kitchen. I want you to fix that recessed lighting that's out. The door doesn't close well, so I need you to do some adjustments to it. Okay, the water heater is not strapped and needs to be strapped. Any and all conditions that the seller eventually accepts and approves to do, this is the opportunity to put it on the final verification. Why? Because this can delay the process of closing escrow. Okay, I want to be crystal clear. This will stop and help navigate that conversation to extend escrow from closing. Remember, this form is done 5 days prior. Now you can do it on the 5th day. You can do it on the 4th. You can do it on the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st, right? And 1 day before. But if there's a lot of concerns that you need to stop the process, you may not want to wait to that last day. Next day it closes and records, right? You want to be proactive. So my engagement is always, the sooner you can get it done, the better that you can arm yourself and protect your buyer from any issues that are not taken care of by the seller. For example, okay, let me go back to the other form. Personal items. What actions must a buyer agent take for a buyer after close of escrow if the buyer informs the agent that the seller has left personal items, right? Well, hello, if you would have done the VP, folks, then you would have at least known, hey, something's up. There's a lot of personal items still here. And you're going to jot that on the VP, the final verification, saying, noted. You know, there's still a lot of sellers' personal items here. Okay, because now that's going to be a new identification for the seller and the listing agent saying, hey, you know what? This doesn't look like we're even 50% in. This doesn't look like it has even been moved yet. It still looks like someone is 100% still living in the property. And you know that this is going to be closing in a couple of days, you know, you start questioning. You don't see any boxes, you don't see things being stacked, you don't see in the garage. You know, all these elements, it needs to be addressed, but you got to be proactive. And now I'm going to be having that conversation with Christine and saying, hey, Christine, hey, Simon with Keller Williams, you know, and typically, okay, most of the time, both agents are usually there with the final verification. Most of the time. And the reason is because now you can have that conversation with the listing agent. Hey, what's up with all this stuff? And you're going to hear it from the seller's listing agent's perspective. Oh, all this stuff is going to be taken care of. We got a moving company coming in tomorrow, the day after. There's going to be about 3 to 4 guys moving all this stuff, but we should be good to go. Well, at least we know, but we're still going to jot it down because the whole purpose, it's no different than an agent visual inspection, better known as the AVIT. All right, when an agent is in escrow, Now you have your agent visual inspection, you're looking at certain things, cracks on the floor. Stains on the wall, right? Missing items, whatever the case may be, but you're putting it on this agent visual inspection. Now, the VP is no difference, okay? So I want to just kind of share with you what it says here. So if the buyer informs the agent that the seller has left personal property behind, the agent can assist the buyer in completing what's called the BDRPP, demand to remove personal property and debris, which the buyer can then send to the address. Now, this is again after the fact, all right? But what did I say? You want to be proactive, and you don't want to have this issue after now you're congratulating the buyer. Congratulations on closings, here are your key to your beautiful home. When you know that there was possibly issues with the home and personal items, things that were not taken care of the requests of repairs, this is again one of the line of defenses that you need to be engaged in that conversation. And that's something that I would be having with the agent at the time. Does that make sense? If the seller has remained in the property in violation of the purchase agreement or post-closing occupancy agreement, such as the seller in possession, which is again the seller in possession, better known as the SIP form. Let's say that you give someone 25 days after close of escrow to stay in possession of the seller, typically, right? But now the 25th, you're looking, it's like, holy moly, they have not done anything to move out of this place, and their intent is not to move out. What if they stay another 30 days? That's a problem. That's definitely a serious issue to have. Obviously, you want to bring that intention to the broker, let the broker be engaged in this conversation and help you navigate and guide you through that. But at the end, let me just explain, and I want to be very crystal clear in my position, okay? Once the deal closes, we officially record. You as a buyer's agent or a listing agent, your job is done. Okay, I want to emphasize, your job is done. And if you wanted to go in that direction, you can definitely say, you know, there's really not much I can do. The deal has closed. And ultimately, we need you to maybe speak with a legal counsel and attorney to guide you through what the next step is. Okay, but what happens with a lot of agents? They don't do it. They usually roll up their sleeve. I want to be Superman, Superwoman, and I want to be engaged because I want to continue building that relationship, right? And that's usually what happens with a lot of agents. They go above and beyond, which is fine. I'm going to switch hats, you know, from my broker hat to a sales agent hat. As a broker hat, I say, you're done, you don't need to be involved. Throw it my way. I will have that conversation with the buyer or the agent. Because now the buyer is the owner, it's home, it's pride of ownership, and if there's some issues, and they need to speak with someone, not us, because we're not attorneys, okay? Or revert back to the contract. But then I wear my agent hat as well, and my agent has this is future business for me. Eventually, these buyers who bought this property 3, 4, 5 years from now, maybe selling their home. I want to keep that relationship because I want to be able to list their home as well. So my agent is going to say, well, I got to do what I need to do to help this because I don't want to look bad in front of my clients. I don't want to feel like I deserted them and had them just take care of them themselves. I want to be proactive in this engagement. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And that's the agent perspective, which is fine. But you got to remember what the contract says is you're done once the deal closes. You don't have to deal with it anymore. Okay? We're on the same page on this?
What's the name of this one?
This form is the BDRPP form, which is anything, well, it's basically oh, you're talking about this form. My apologies. This is straight from the California Association of Realtors. This is your quick guide. And it's called Agency Relationship and Duties After a Real Estate Transaction. Please, question. You never forget. Well, if you remember, let me know. Okay. So the other avenue is, again, the engagement is the importance, and this is why I wanted to bring the VP form as part of the conversation, is because that gives you some insight. If you put a request of a list of items that are going to be taken care of. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want you to fix that door. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want you to strap that water heater. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want you to fix that light. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I need you to correct the handle on that sliding door, okay? Because once the buyer releases any and all contingencies, then basically they're exposing their good faith deposit. So in my position, I did what I needed to do to move forward in the process of the sale. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, did you do what you needed to do and promise to take care of those items? Because as soon as I release, I want to be clear, sellers, did you take care of it? And I'm going to be in communication as an agent to agent relationship and ask the listing agent, show me proof that those items were taken care of. Yes, sir.
Isn't the seller not obligated to make any of those fixes, or are they?
Good question. All property are sold in its as is condition.
Yeah.
But remember, it's always a give and take. And what I mean by that is a buyer can put a request. Okay, that's part of the negotiations. The buyer says, look, there's 3 things that I can request. I can request that the seller take care of these items. I can ask, instead of the repair, in lieu of the repairs, just give me the credit after close of escrow. I'll take care of those items. I'm a handyman. I can do it. Or I have someone that can help me with it at a reasonable cost. Or I'm not going to sweat it, but it would be great to have that extra income that I would get from the credit, so that way I can work on it or work on other projects. Either of those are perfectly fine. The last is in lieu of the repairs or the credit, we can ask for a price reduction. Okay. Those are usually big item tickets. Foundation issues, roof issues, plumbing issues, sewer issues, big ticket number costs, right? A sewer inspection, that a sewer pipe is damaged, can be anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000. A roof can cost you $10,000 to $15,000 as well. Okay, electrical can be in the range of $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the size of the home. Okay, foundation issues could be big major concerns, right? If the house is bleeding, right? It's on a raised foundation, but underneath is deteriorating for many, many years. The home was built in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Right? And that may have some issues as well. So in order for us to correct it, instead of saying the sellers, because the sellers can be older, right? They don't have the time to go get a contractor to do this. We either give you the credit, or we just do a price reduction. So if I submitted an offer, right, at $1 million as an example, but there's major foundation issues, and that's going to cost us $25,000. I could say a request repairs is, look, don't worry, I'd rather have the price reduction from $1 million. Let's do $975,000. If seller says okay, and the buyer submits that request, then you get that accepted, and then you'll draft an addendum that goes to escrow, and then escrow will adjust the numbers on that. Christine, you have a question.
Well, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Because it sounds like that scenario that you just provided is an inspection that happens during the contingency period that you have to be able to do that physical inspection. But so, and that's when you identify things that can be remedied or requested to be either remedied or compensated by the seller. But to differentiate the VP document, which is just before closing, that opportunity is just to make sure that anything that was requested to be changed or amended, fixed, has occurred by that point.
Absolutely.
But it's not necessarily for new things to be identified during the VP phase.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you for sharing, but that also can include new items that are discovered.
Okay,
Okay, so thank you, because you're 2 steps ahead of me, which is awesome. So the VP also will identify, let's say that a homeowner has lived there for 35 years. And had many personal items, furniture there that has not been touched. A home inspector is not going to go out there and start moving furniture to see if everything is intact. They won't do that for liability purposes. One, they damage, break something, it falls on them. They get hurt, then it's sometimes on them. So they won't go and do any personal items of removal to identify. If the garage is full of stuff, they're just gonna know, couldn't complete the inspection due to the garage with full of personal items. They're not gonna go in there and start digging and flash, oh, okay, this, no. That includes furniture too. They're not gonna move furniture to identify an issue with the home. They're gonna note it, couldn't do the full inspection due to. Now that the seller is about to close, they're packing, and now that VP, you realize, holy moly. In the closet, we couldn't see because there were so many personal items, they looked like it's mold. Or there's a huge crack there. That gives you a time to address it. Mold was, no, I wouldn't say mold, but a substance that appears to be like mold was identified. We may need to get an inspection done. Or if there's a severe crack or something that doesn't look right, well, that gives you the time to put the brakes on the escrow and get clarity on what that is, or get an inspection done. And because this is now considered a new material fact, it allows the buyer additional time to investigate, do research, get the proper people out there to identify what the issue, because this is something that was not addressed or wasn't even part of the equation on the deal. Does that make sense?
The seller saying too bad.
Well, the seller can say too bad, but we can say we're not going to move forward until we address this issue. Remember, it's a two-way thing. It's not just one-sided. I can say, yeah, I can be stern, too bad. You're gonna buy it or not? But if there is new discovery, the buyer definitely has a little bit of wiggle room to maneuver that negotiations. Now, it's far and few, and usually you may have an agent that says, look, it's too late. We're about to close in 3 days. You release all contingencies. I understand that, but we're not going to close until we come to an agreement. And that agreement may be, I got a quote on this, it's going to be about $1,500. I know this is not the norm, but I'm asking for that credit or to get it done. And sometimes you can close a deal and know that it's going to be taken care of, close of escrow, because sometimes a conflict can be with the company that's out there. Maybe they have so many jobs, they cannot do it before it closes. But if there's an agreement, they have agreed to it, it can be closed and ultimately can be done after close of escrow. So.
and so those new discoveries, what form do you need to use to, I guess, get confirmation that work will get done?
Yeah, so the final verification will be done, and then you're going to send an email and addendum to escrow. The addendum is going to reflect there was new issues discovered on the property. Buyer has requested to delay the process of closing. We have already they have already identified and agreed to And ultimately, that now is given to escrow. Escrow is as a third party, they have to abide by that and ultimately stop. Now, the seller could say, look, you know what, this is not right. You know, we need to continue with it, yeah, but it has to be mutually agreed by both parties to continue or stop the deal. And address the issue. That's the power that buyers and sellers have is, you know, you have to be able to maneuver because you don't want to close this deal, right? Deal closes and now everyone feels the pan. Escrow, lender, agents, inspectors and all that stuff. You want to address it before it closes because one, the seller's not going to take the proceeds and run. They are out. They've sold the house. They're moving out of state. We're not going to be able to find this seller anymore. So this is the reason you want to put the brakes on it. This is why it's vital that the verification of final walkthrough is done early in the process instead of last minute. And I've seen agents do a final walkthrough the same day it's about to record. That's not acceptable, but it happens. So I want you to understand your position and be very proactive. Yes.
So if you happen to show up at a house where it appears that they haven't even started packing, but it's because they're getting a company in who's gonna do all the packing and moving for them kind of all in one go. Can you still request, like even if you've done the walkthrough and everything looks okay, can you still go back after that's done and do another walkthrough to make sure that there isn't anything that was still hidden? That you couldn't see because of the amount of.
You mean after doing your first verification walkthrough?
Like that, because that's it. Like if they have so many belongings that you can't actually see walls and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Kind of
it's
unusual.
definitely something that you want to note on your VP is due to the personal items on the property. We may have to go on a second time after a lot of the stuff is clear to finalize the verification of walkthrough. So you can note that on the VP. Remember, everything you want to do is paper trail. All right, so because you're not going to remember every element of what happens, but you know what you jotted down, noted on your VP or any documentation, because now you can go back to it and say, okay, this is the reason we had to go back. Because there was too many personal items. Makes sense?
So you don't accept the first inspection,
Don't accept the
the
first.
buyer doesn't accept the first inspection.
What do you mean by the inspection?
The first of the final.
The final inspection, there is a bunch of stuff, it doesn't see the crack in the wall. Because there is a bunch of furniture behind the wall.
Yeah,
And when they took everything out, there is a big crack in the wall.
yeah.
And
Yeah, so let's just say, for example, this television, right? Or that frame behind you, right? That's been there for 30 years. No one has touched that. And as soon as you take that out, you see this big whopping hole on it, right? Or you see issues behind, like stains that appear to be water damage, right? We didn't know that because you had this television here and now you pull it out, you see all this. One, the listing agent and the seller need to be proactive. As soon as they identify that, they need to let the buyer know. Because it's best to disclose that the element of surprise. You walk out and now you see this big old hole, and now the buyer's going to be fuming furious. They may file a complaint against you and try to sue. You want to be engaged in that and be proactive. I'd rather you tell them the bad news instead of not saying anything and just walking away. Because usually buyers will get very annoyed by that. Is how come you didn't tell me that this frame or television had a big issue behind it, right? Immediately, the seller and you need to be proactive, call the listing buyer's agent and say, hey, by the way, I just want to let you know, we've just discovered, as soon as we took this picture frame after being there for 30 years, here's a photo. Take photos, send it. You want to disclose, it's better. You don't want to be in the chaos that you knew, didn't disclose, and now you're in the mix of a potential lawsuit. Just saying. Okay. We live in the state of California, folks. You know. Everyone wants to be sue happy, sue everyone, you know, it is what it is. Okay? Any thoughts, questions, and concerns regarding this? Any other questions that I might be able to address before we close it out? Pretty self-explanatory, yes.
So the VP, after the VP form is filled out, whether or not the seller decides to accept, the buyer wants credit or want them to fix certain items, whether they accept it or not, we still send in an email and addendum to escrow.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. So let me just read what the VP says and the whole purpose of this. The purpose of this inspection is to satisfy the buyer, right? Regarding the condition of the property. Unless otherwise agreed, buyer and seller understand and agree that the final inspection is not a contingency of this agreement. So you cannot use this to say, oh, wait a minute, you know, I gotta put the brakes because, you know, this new discovery that I just found out is not acceptable. Therefore, I'm gonna try to keep that if they do decide to back out of the deal. And potentially may jeopardize their deposit. So I just want to be crystal clear that this is not a way to say it's a contingency, because it's not. As soon as the buyer releases any and all, that's it. But what this identify is new discovery that now you can delay the process, negotiate with the seller, or say, you know what, I'm not going to deal with it. I just rather close the deal and then we'll deal with it after the fact. Yes, sir.
Does the seller have a certain amount of days to respond to that addendum, and if they're gonna do the credit or repairs or not?
The answer is no. There's no specific time. Again, this is where you as a licensed professional need to be proactive and diligent and want to respond immediately, because the longer you don't, the more the people get frustrated and the more that they will eventually speak with an attorney and ultimately file a complaint against you. So I would caution you, if you are working with the seller and the buyer's agent reaches out to you, be proactive, start having a conversation with the seller. Hey, this is what just came up. You know, how do you want me to proceed with this? How are we going to address it? Because again, we're about to close. We want to make it a win-win. It's a small, minor fix. You know, we can throw money at it, or we can get someone out there to get it fixed, but we got to do something. I'd rather have the buyer have a good experience than have a really bad experience with the process of their first time buying a home, right? So you got to remember, you do those things as well.
And a notice to perform can't be used in conjunction with issues that are identified on this, right?
Not a notice to perform, because the notice to perform is only when either party has breached the contract and not perform on a contingency, buyer contingency, or even a seller contingency. So this VP will not have anything to do with the notice to perform. But good question, by the way. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Oh, let me just finish. So let's talk about the verification of property or its waiver is not intended in any way to alter the obligation of the seller regarding the condition of the property to be delivered. The buyer at possession date is not based upon any statement or representation by broker, associate, license, or brokerage and employees. The parties agree to hold broker and associate license and brokerage employees harmless from any liability claims, demands, damages, or consequences out of the contract obligation of the buyer and the seller. The condition of the property, where am I? The condition of the property. Okay, so then the buyer acknowledges the property is in the same condition as the date of acceptance of the offer to purchase now, and seller has completed all the repairs, alterations, replacements, modifications as agreed to by the buyer and the seller within the following exceptions. And that means, okay, so really what it really boils down to is really what I said earlier, the two things is any request that the buyer wanted and the seller granted and said, I'll take care of that. That's where you're going to say, well, you said this was going to be taken care of, that's going to be taken care of, this, and this. Everything except this hasn't been taken care of. That's where you're going to note it here. The water heater has not been braced accurately. the earthquake shut-off valve has not been replaced, you're gonna take a photo and then include it with your BP, and you're gonna note it as paper trail as well, okay? And then ultimately, if there's personal items, you would also note it here, and I would take photos. Take photos of everything and then send it with a BP to the listing agent, so the listing agent has paper trail. And says, look, this is what the buyer and buyer's agent just identified, we need to get this taken care of, especially if we're in the time frame to close this deal, you want to be proactive before this deal closes. All right? Cool. Any other questions? Anyone on Zoom? All right, well, that concludes our class. Thank you. I appreciate you all. If you have any questions or if you want a copy of this letter, please just send me an email. I'll be more than happy to send it to you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Be safe. All right. Thanks. Appreciate you guys.